a spooky Halloween edition of the Rundown. Okay, that's way too bright. Hi, my name is Tom Hollingsworth, and we are coming to you live today from the Gestalt IT global headquarters all over the place with a special episode of the Wednesday Rundown, your weekly news source for all things happening in enterprise tech. Joining me today is our good friend, Ken Nalbone. Ken, let everybody know who you are.
I like Kel better. Let's just call me Kel from now on. I'm Ken Nalbone. I'm event lead for Tech Field Day at Gestalt IT. You can find me on Twitter at Ken Nalbone. Am I supposed to do that part yet? I don't even know. But
you know what?
That's
we'll
me.
just roll with it.
Okay.
All right. Well, Ken, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we've got a packed news week. So let's get going. The first thing we actually want to talk about is something that was announced last Sunday, and that would be the big IBM Red Hat acquisition. IBM will be purchasing Red Hat for about $34 billion in stock. What the funny thing is, though, we're actually not going to cover that story in depth today because we did that already on Monday. That's right. Ken and I and Rich and Stephen Foskett, we jumped on the video chat line and had a great conversation about this. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, please head over to our Facebook page at gestaltit.com. I'm sorry, our Facebook page, which is Gestalt IT, or our website, which is gestaltit.com. That was a weird portmanteau right there. And you can watch that video, but don't check it out yet because we've still got a little bit more news headed your way. Starting off with another big acquisition that's now final. After closing out of the European Commission approval just about 2 weeks ago, the rest of the dominoes in the GitHub acquisition have quickly fallen into place. On Friday, the new GitHub CEO, Nat Friedman, announced that the acquisition is complete. In a blog post, Friedman reiterated that GitHub will act independently as a community platform and business while also retaining its product philosophy. Now, I've also heard rumors that GitLab, which was another product that was heavily leveraging GitHub, is quickly trying to migrate off onto Google Compute Engine because evidently they don't trust Microsoft as far as they can throw them. Now, Ken, do you buy this whole line that Microsoft is throwing out about how they're going to let GitHub be independent and kind of do their own thing? And has this changed your opinion on the acquisition one way or the other since it was announced over the summer?
I buy that they'll remain independent until they won't. But I was cautious and skeptical when I first heard the announcement. I'm more inclined to trust Microsoft than I was 10 or even 5 years ago. So I will, go along with it, half believe it, half kind of remain skeptical. But until they prove me wrong, Microsoft is making a lot of right moves. I think the acquisition was a good one. And I think that their head's in the right place. So hopefully they stay true to their word.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. If this was Gates or Ballmer's Microsoft, this would have been carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey already. But with Nadella, I have a firm belief that GitHub is still going to be able to do what they do. I mean, let's face it. Do you remember that Microsoft owns LinkedIn? Because I bet you don't. They've pretty much left that property alone. Although I will say that Microsoft's done an amazing job of getting people to use LinkedIn. I don't know how many more people they can get on GitHub. I think everybody has a repo out there somewhere.
That's correct.
All right, so let's move on to some exciting federal law news. Yay! California has decided not to push it with their showdown on the Federal Communications Commission. Well, for now. This year, the California voters passed a state law that enforced tough regulations aimed at enforcing net neutrality, our favorite boogeyman, right? Because this was in response to the FCC's repeal of many of the protections that have been in place for the last few years. As soon as the law was passed in California, or California-wide election, the federal government filed suit to block implementation of the law. In an agreement that was reached this week, California will not implement the law as agreed upon on January 1, 2019, until the outcome of the court case has been decided. Now, there's a couple of things that are in play here that are kind of interesting to observers. The first one is purely technical, and the fact that pretty much all the traffic that you send to Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat is going to have to go through California at some point, which means that those services are going to be forced to adhere to the new net neutrality laws, which means things like AT&T won't be allowed to zero rate some of their services, and that's going to be a huge thing for providers. The second thing that's actually kind of interesting, more from a non-techie perspective, is that the FCC is essentially saying that their ruling overrides the state's ability to implement their own laws. Now, kids, that's a constitutional thing, and we've got to get to the bottom of that. So where do we think that this is going to fall, Ken? And honestly, how is this going to impact the ability of the FCC in the future to propose or dismiss net neutrality if the states are just going to step in and do their own thing?
Well, I don't think that we've seen the end of this just because they decided not to implement it. Probably what will end up is some kind of battle between the federal government and the state, as we've seen over many issues over the years, but I'm not a constitutional scholar who can comment on those. But with this being one of the largest economies, not only in the country, but in the world, and all the tech companies that are incentivized to make sure laws like this go through, you're likely to see that their lobbying powers behind it. And as where states' rights versus federal government regulations come into play against each other on this, I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but we'll see something happen. I think California is going to lead the way. I can think of many other states that would, other than, I don't know, maybe Texas. Who knows?
Yeah, well, you've also got the possibility of New York State stepping in. They've always been pretty aggressive with things like this. The other thing that's kind of hiding out there in the shadows is that if California can get this passed, where they can pass a state law that overrides the federal government's regulation, they've already said that they want to have a GDPR-style law on the books that protects the privacy of their users. And boy, if you think that the services were lobbying against implementation of net neutrality rules, you tell Facebook they have to implement GDPR in the U.S., I promise you they're going to back up super tankers full of cash to every legislative person that they can find to get this thing knocked out really fast. Because GDPR-style controls for California would pretty much be the end of a lot of businesses out there that are doing data scraping and trying to get information out of people as their entire business model. So this showdown, I'm kind of interested to see how far the FCC is willing to push it, because Ajit Pai, everyone's favorite giant Reese's mug drinking guy, has quoted in the article that we linked here that he thinks that the FCC has a really strong case here, which is ironic considering that the only thing he's been doing for the last few months is gutting every bit of the FCC's capability to regulate businesses that are doing things. So I don't know. I kind of hope that California sticks it to him a little bit. I kind of hope that we get some clarity on this, and I kind of hope that we push the boundaries of things as far as they can go, if for no other reason than to start some really honest discussions that need to happen around here, other than, boy, I'll just let Verizon do whatever they want.
I agree. With Ajit Pai, I don't know him that well. All I know is I don't think I like him very much.
Well, if you haven't had a chance, go to YouTube and search for Last Week Tonight. John Oliver has some really interesting things to say about him, and the fact that John Oliver and his group managed to crash the FCC's petition site twice with traffic on net neutrality comments, and yet somehow the people that run that network thought that was the denial of service attack launched by nefarious actors. No,
I think I remember hearing about that one. Yeah,
people just want to make themselves heard. Imagine that. All right. Leave it to Google to eat an entire top-level domain to save you about 15 seconds. This week, it was announced that Google has registered .new, yes, that's .new, as a top-level domain. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, it's a shortcut. Seriously, go to your web browser right now and type in doc.new or document.new, sheet.new, presentation.new, or any variation thereof, and Google's just going to jump right in, launch their G-Spot application suite, which, by the way, is the worst name for something ever imaginable, and it'll pop up a brand new blank document. Now, of course, if you're not logged in, you're going to have to do that, but who's not logged into Google anymore?
The bigger problem is the people who are logged in multiple times. Which account is it going to default to? No, I didn't want to create it with that account.
Yeah, exactly. Boy, man, this got complicated real fast. No word yet on how long the Google countdown to extinction clock is set for this feature, but knowing Google, I give it till next Flag Day. Ken, is this going to save you hours of time each day and make your life infinitely better, or is it just a publicity stunt?
It's a stunt. It's going to be killed or forgotten in a relatively short time, in a few months. Only the most diehard G Suite fans will care about it. Everybody else will ignore it and continue with their same old workflow. This is pretty easy. It's dumb. Next story.
Yeah, it's really dumb. And Google, if you're listening, I know you are. Larry Page, big fan. Well, not really a big fan. I use your stuff. Don't do dumb stuff like this. Yeah, fix that whole privacy thing first. Alrighty. Who likes copy protection? Why do I not see any hands?
No, I don't
Okay.
actually.
The Library of Congress published some new exemptions for the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, another person's favorite old boogeyman from the 90s. These new exemptions will allow archiving of server and local game code. So gamers out there, I know your ears just perked up. We're about to level up, dudes. Provided you obtain it all legally. Womp womp. This would allow archivists to set up servers outside of a company's direct control to authenticate software installs, particularly useful in massively multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs. Sadly, this is limited to officially recognized archivists, such as and there was a proposed exemption for citizen archivists, but that was denied. This could have really big implications for archiving a lot of enterprise apps as well, because the Library of Congress has already ruled about 3 years ago that you're allowed to crack copy protection and digital right management software for the purposes of archiving. And I know that we've got a lot of technology out there that's basically been abandonware. If you're a fan of sites like Good Old Games or abandonware.com, I mean, games that were popular even just 10 or 12 years ago are basically, they're out there for free because, well, nobody cares about them anymore. So is this going to be a huge deal that the Library of Congress has come down on the side of, you know what, break all that handy-dandy security crap just to hold on to this stuff so that we have a little bit of preservation of our digital technology?
So I've been a connoisseur of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA, ever since its inception back in the late 90s. And I'm always pretty much in favor of exemptions for fair use rights. However, I see like this particular ruling being complicated to execute. Any kind of online game or subscription-based enterprise app, it's difficult to do. And I see that they're making exemptions for setting up some kind of server outside the company's control. How often are they going to actually do that? For every piece of software they archive? Probably not. Maybe in some time of need when they need to bring up this abandoned app for some kind of research purposes, they'll make it possible. I don't know how well they're actually going to execute it. So other than storing that code for both the server and the client somewhere in an archive, what else can you do with it? Anything, or is it just there for history?
By making it limited to the archivists being able to pull that stuff down, I think that they're shooting for historical accuracy, because I don't know if you can tell from behind me or not, but over in the corner of doom behind my TV is a banker's box full of retail boxes of dead MMO software that I've played in the past. Such hits as Star Wars Galaxies, Tabula Rasa, City of Heroes, and they all have one thing in common. They all got shut down because they weren't making any money. And so what happens is that code exists out there somewhere, and someone might be able to make it happen. Now, in the case of Star Wars Galaxies, it had such a thriving player base at the time that they've essentially reverse engineered the game and turned it into an emulation version, which, of course, is great if you want to play an MMO from 2003. But for newer games, it's a lot more difficult to do that, because as it turns out, when a lot of that emulation happens on the server side and not on the client side like it does in World of Warcraft, it's really hard to recreate all of that functionality. And the funny thing is that certain game publishers, NCSoft, they love to delete all of the code that they have, destroy it, nuke it from orbit, and then blow the planet apart with a giant Nova bomb. Because quite honestly, they don't want anybody reusing their intellectual property. And so that's what this is kind of designed to combat. And yes, guys, I'm still not forgiving you for shutting down Atlas Park 33. All right. Enough about the DMCA. Let's talk about drones.
Yes,
thanks to a leak that's been confirmed, we kind of know where DJI is about to pilot their drone program next. They launched the Maverick 2 Enterprise drone. You're probably sitting there stroking your chin right now, thinking to yourself, well, what makes a drone enterprise grade other than having Meraki access point on it or having a higher price? Well, accessories, of course. DJI has created a drone that's really capable of taking accessories onto the drone body itself. And this initial release is really focused on search and rescue. So if you look on the site for the Maverick 2 Enterprise, you can buy accessories like a spotlight for low light searching. You can clip a loudspeaker to the top of it so that when you're shouting for lost hikers, they can hear you a little more amplified. And then They also can clip a beacon to the top of it, like the ones that are on the life vests that they put on international flights, the ones you can see from like 4 or 5 miles away in super, super bright sunlight. This kind of feels a lot like DJI is trying to capture a market that's kind of exploded out of their way. In a lot of ways, like, remember when the iPhone was a consumer piece of technology that everyone just got for Christmas one year and brought into the enterprise, and now all of a sudden it's an enterprise technology?
Yes,
That's what this kind of, yeah, it kind of feels like this, where a lot of police officers, firefighters, and things like that are using drones in ways that had not originally been described. I remember seeing some reports from the California wildfires that were happening earlier this year. The people were using drones to get a better idea of how the fires were going. I know here in Oklahoma, because we have severe weather, a lot of people have started taking to using drones to get pictures of the severe clouds up higher, because not everybody can afford a news helicopter. So,
Right.
Ken, is this the wave of the future? Are we going to see drones flying around everywhere? You know, Amazon wants to deliver our packages with them. Now it appears that DJI is trying to get them into the enterprise. Or is this really just trying to curtail the fact that people are buying a $700 or $800 drone and using it for a commercial purpose or an emergency purpose, and DJI wants some of that sweet, sweet cash?
So I'm not a huge drone person. I don't have one. I don't plan on buying one. I can think of better uses for money, but I have seen some interesting uses for it that I never would have conceived of. And I can see why DJI wants to get in the enterprise space, but is this really just an accessory holder version of a consumer grade drone? Is there nothing about it that's, more ruggedized or more powerful, or does it come even with like a better warranty and support for when the enterprise breaks it and wants it working again so they can make money or perform the rescue operations or whatever? If they're not doing any of those things, then it's really nothing special. If they really want to make this more than just a consumer grade product, they need to have an enterprise SKU, not just a clip-on version of their consumer drone.
Yeah, you're right. And I know a lot of people really love the DJI drones because they're well built and they're not like the ones you get from like trade shows that fall apart as soon as you take them out of the suitcase when you get home. But they're already not cheap. So,
Do
this
they
is going to have to
have
be.
user replaceable parts? If a
Uh,
consumer breaks their drone, can they fix it relatively easily?
I believe that they do. I believe DJI offers user replaceable parts. I know my brother, who is huge into drones, he kind of built one himself along the same style of it. And he said one of the reasons why is because he can get the same performance profile that he could out of the other one at half the price. But he also then spent half of that in replacement parts because, well, maybe they're not the best.
Yeah, if I could have some kind of warranty or service agreement with DJI when I buy this for my enterprise, that will just say you've got to pay this, almost like when you buy a server or something. You've got this service contract, and we'll replace the parts when they break under these conditions, and you will have it next business day or within 4 hours or whatever. Then yes, it's a legit enterprise product.
Good. Well, here's hoping. Drone enterprises, yay. Moving on to our next story, get your fingers ready, because thanks to Axios, we've gotten some stats from Twitter about the tweet length, because today is the 1-year anniversary of doubling the tweet length to 280 characters. The most common tweet length, according to Twitter, is a scant 33 characters, which is actually down 1 from last year. Only 1% of all tweets that have been sent in the last year have bumped the 280 character limit. However, the use of the word please is up a startling 54%. Abbreviation use is down heavily, using things like GR8 for great. And people are starting to leverage a lot more of the platform, using things like multi-part tweet storms to basically tweet an entire blog post to their followers, part 1/X. Ken, is this a huge shift in the way that we use social media? And honestly, if you DGAF, IDK, should I ask my BFF Jill?
You lost me at the last sentence because I don't use abbreviations on Twitter, but I'm glad I don't have to anymore. For me personally, it was just like, oh, good. Now I can fit those few extra words in that I never could before. I haven't seen a huge shift, except for those tweet storms that really should be a blog post to begin with. Thankfully, I don't see them regularly, but once or twice a week you come across it, and I get tired of reading it after a little while when I really should have just had a hyperlink to your blog. I don't think it's going to be a huge shift in the way we use social media. Obviously, the stats prove that there's not been a huge shift in the past year, and long term, some people's behaviors might change drastically, but for most people, they get what Twitter is for. It's for short messages, punchy to the point, and link longer form content outside of Twitter.
Well, you probably can't see it on the camera, but I'm currently standing on my favorite soapbox here because Twitter is one of the things that I use for work and for pleasure, and they drive me up the wall.
First of all, don't have an edit button.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, edit button is basically like the top of the punch list since the go. Why is the average tweet length down? I don't know, because you guys have shut down several 100,000 bot accounts. So maybe they're not tweeting as much. Just a thought. Rather than looking at what users actually want to do, which is things like, I don't know, edit button, robust abilities to block and control content. I don't know, not screwing with the developers and sending out their APIs. Well, to this week, they announced, we're thinking about removing the like button because it's not really adding much to discourse. Do you even use your platform anymore, Jack? Yeah, I know you're probably watching this on your screen in your office while you're meddling with the Twitter code base again. Don't. Ask your users what they want. Listen to your users. Quit caving in to the corporate interests and tell me why you think your user counts are down, why they flatlined over the last 18 months. I'll give you a hint. Your user growth was inorganic because they were all fake. Listen to the people who have heartbeats and brains and do what they want.
Maybe he should set up a Twitter poll.
I would, except the third-party client that I use. Because
maybe Jack should.
I know, right? I mean, I'd set it up, but unfortunately, polls are like group DMs. It's one of those features that they refuse to release to anybody that's not a first-party client. And their website is a hot garbage dumpster fire train wreck.
Oh, but they can just fix that by closing off more of the API, right?
Oh, sure. Or charging an obscene amount of money for it. Okay, sure, I'm off my soapbox now. All right, it wouldn't be a Gestalt IT Rundown without some news about chips. So this report comes from Bloomberg, and it involves servers, so I hope you have many grains of salt ready for this. They're reporting that Xilinx FPGAs now appear in over 50% of Azure servers, displacing Intel's Altera products. According to sources, Microsoft is still evaluating how Xilinx FPGAs are performing to see how widely they're going to end up deploying them overall. Intel is already having trouble competing outside of the x86 market. ARM is eating their lunch. Their 2015 purchase of Altera for $16 billion was supposed to be an investment in the forefront of adding programmable silicon to platforms. Now, assuming that we can believe Bloomberg on this, because let's face it, they haven't had the best track record recently, is this a bad thing for Intel? Are we seeing the dawn of the final days of x86 when it comes to cloud platforms?
Am I interpreting the article correctly that these are co-processors that are going to be on the same board and the same server with an x86 processor, in which case Intel's still going to have a piece of the pie? Probably not a huge deal. I don't know how big of a revenue portion the co-processors, the FPGAs are, but as long as it's not Xilinx chips and AMD EPYC CPUs in Azure servers, then it's probably not as huge a deal, but it means something, right?
Yeah.
It's not like the first time that you've seen non-Intel chips on motherboards that use Intel CPUs. I mean, we've seen chipsets going back ever since the inception of the x86 from other companies. So I'm sure that Intel would like their chips to be all over the boards inside Azure's data centers, but at least they have the chip, right?
Yeah, that's true. And part of the reason why this is such an important deal for Intel is because I think they feel like they've hit peak x86, that they've put as many x86s out there as they're going to get. They're in a refresh cycle, and what they were hoping was to capture that coprocessor market. They were hoping to drop that silicon down there because, I mean, when you look at the iPhone, the Intel makes some of the basebands for those, but they do not make the chips. They missed the mobile market big time. And to quote my favorite friend of hacking, Crash Override, RISC architecture is going to change everything. And it did, because ARM and SoCs are kind of taking over the world, and that leaves Intel kind of, in the big iron mode. And if they can't make the move to something like FPGAs or programmable coprocessors to kind of shore up that research while they're trying to figure out where to make that next move, things are not going to be as rosy for them as they had been back in the old Intel Inside days.
It is kind of puzzling why they haven't been able to find a chip market outside of x86 in all this time. They've got other products besides, processing chips. Of course, they've got storage. They're big in that, but why not? It's kind of mystifying.
It is, and only Intel knows why, and they're not talking.
And I think they don't know why, which is why they can't seem to fix it.
You could be right there. All right, one last story from this week. Atlassian continues to shed anything that they make in order to make a buck. They've announced that they've sold their open source video conferencing solution Jitsi, that's Jitsi, to 8x8 for an undisclosed sum, which means they probably gave it away. The move comes several weeks after Atlassian sold off the IP rights to HipChat and Stride to their competitor Slack, who then promptly killed them. The move shouldn't be too surprising, as Jitsi was originally acquired about 3 years ago to bring video conferencing to all of those apps, which they then promptly got rid of. The Atlassian purge now leaves the company completely focused on Trello, which is probably something you guys use, and Jira, which is probably something you guys wish you didn't use. So realistically speaking, Ken, is Atlassian finally realizing that just buying anything that's for sale and trying to integrate it together is not the way forward? Or does this mean that we are at the end of using video chat and Slack competitors?
I think they're conceding that market at the very least to Slack, and they're probably right to do so. You don't need to own the entire collaboration market, just a portion of it to be successful, and find a way to integrate with the others so that you're still relevant, right? Just integrate with Slack, don't compete with it. Why not?
Yeah, that's a lot of what we're seeing is that a lot of people, are starting to use these frameworks. It's like, oh, build your own Slack room, and then they realize nobody cares. It's like building it's Mastodon. Mastodon is a competitor to Twitter. You know why nobody uses Mastodon? Because nobody's there. Okay, great. I can build my own Twitter. I haven't
heard that name in a long time. I forgot it existed.
Exactly. Everybody goes to Twitter for the same reason everybody goes to Facebook or Instagram or Slack, is because they're the most popular platforms out there to use those things. And yeah, I'm sure there's some fanboy that's crying right now about using IRC in place of everything else. But you know what? It's like Microsoft Teams. Okay, who cares? Microsoft is using Teams because they can give it away for free and they can integrate it into everything that they do. Great. I don't care.
People are going to go where everybody else is. Who's the bank robber who had the famous quote? Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is.
Oh, still
people are going to use Dillinger. Why are people going to Slack? Because that's where everybody else is.
Yeah, and most people are at this point are on Slack overload anyway. I just went down and paired off 3 teams that I was a member of because there was never anything going on in them. They were consuming resources because, let's be fair, the only thing that uses more resources on my laptop than Slack is Chrome. And I mean, it was pointless. I need to focus more on what is important and less on sidebar conversations. And so that's, something's got to go, and that's part of it. So, okay, great. Good luck to 8x8. I hope you can make Jitsi into something that's useful. Lord knows we need another video conferencing solution because everything else sucks. So, hope for the future for you there. All right, well, that's just going to do it for us for this spooky Halloween edition of the Rundown. I am currently boarding up my windows and putting iron bars on so the trick-or-treaters don't think that there's anybody home, because I don't want to have to hand out any more full-size Snickers bars. But if you've missed any of this episode or any of the episodes that we've recorded, including our special take on the Red Hat IBM acquisition, please make sure that you head over to the Gestalt IT Facebook page, where you're probably watching this right now. Scroll back through the archives or head over to gestaltit.com, where we'll have a link up with all of the posts that we've made from the rundown so far. You can also catch this episode on YouTube as well as the others shortly after its broadcast. Remember that we are live on Facebook every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern Daylight Time. And if that time changes for any reason, we'll be sure to tweet you guys and let you know, so you can tune in and watch live as Ken and Rich and I banter about the news. Now, Ken, if people want to find out a little bit more about you and what you do, where can they find that out?
They can find me on Twitter as @KenNalbone. Also, you can find my blog, fullstackkengineer.com, or also on gestaltit.com.
All right. And if you want to follow more of me on Twitter, now that I'm tweeting with 142 characters minimum every time, please make sure to follow me as @NetworkingNerd. And if you want to see my long form tweet storms with pictures, be sure to head over to my blog at networkingnerd.net, or you can head over to gestaltit.com, where we will be posting some more great content. I just put up a post about some great security companies, Guardicore, and a new one that launched this week, Edgeworks. So be sure to check those out. And for those of us in the audience who are following along, I hope that you have a super spooky, sparkly day.